Buenas tardes.
Good afternoon. Thank you for being here. I would like to start by thanking Espacio Fundación Telefónica for having us here today once again in this cozy place. So nice that we are used to coming to visit, and we are really happy to be here again. And thank you also to Blanca Lacasa, the well-known author and journalist, who's going to be here with us to have this conversation with Gwendoline Riley, who is the author of this book, My Phantoms. This is her first novel that has been translated into Spanish, but she has already published 7 books, and she has received several awards, and she is highly valued in the Anglo-Saxon world. And with this novel that deals with the relationship between mothers and daughters, or daughters and mothers, that I think we're going to delve into in a very interesting manner with them both. So.
Bueno, hola.
Well, hello, welcome everyone. I have to say that when I was called by Jose Hamad, who is the publisher of Sexto Piso, to introduce this book, I wasn't surprised at all because of what Santiago has said, that it delves into the relationship between mothers and daughters. I have written a book called Terrible Daughters that also talks about this topic. It is an essay rather than a fiction book. But when I was reading your book, Gwendoline, I was thinking that it's a pity that this wasn't translated before. That would have been very useful for me. Many of the things that you touch on in your book are things that I had to think about when I wrote my own book. And I think that in your book you reflect very well all these underlying tensions, all these misunderstandings, these grievances from the past, and these that can actually dynamite, that can make all their relationships in the present time blow up, and especially between these protagonists of our books, of this book, Helen and Bridget. And the fact that this book resonates so much with us, with the readers, many people that I know who have read this book have said the same thing. I think that the reason why this happens is because we're all sons or daughters, and one of the great successes of My Phantoms is that by starting with very day-to-day situations, there is no big drama in your novel, but we all feel touched by what you tell us, because you talk about a universal topic that sometimes it's only about the impossibility of getting to an understanding. And to start from the beginning, as we said, My Phantoms deals with that difficult thing that is the relationship between mothers and daughters, and you do this by portraying the connection between Helen, the mother, and Bridget, the daughter. I would like you to tell us why you wanted to delve into this topic, or was it something like starting building the characters that led you to writing this book?
I'm a bit loud. I think for me, writing a novel often starts with an image, and the image that came to me that became My Phantoms was of the daughter watching the mother do her hair one evening. So she's seeing Hen sitting on the edge of her bed, and she's using hair mousse, which a lot of women in 1980s England used to use. You'd squish out a golf ball sized bit of hair mousse and you'd go like that. That image came to me, somewhat of a memory from my own childhood, and it appealed to me because I liked the daughter watching the mother, and I liked the slightly neurotic action of the hands doing this on the mother's head. I thought that implied something a little bit frightening and troubled. So I sort of started from there to write the book, and then I thought about 2 women's lives and how they might antagonize each other. 2 books that I'm a great fan of to talk about mothers is Peter Handke's book, A Sorrow Beyond Dreams, which is about his mother, who grew up in Germany, pre-war, I think, just about, and ended up committing suicide. And his rubric when writing that book was to write about the things that happened to every woman of her generation. They affected her particularly, but he writes about the things that they all did at that time, the things they all watched, the things they all believed, wore, ate, that kind of thing. Another book that I really love is The Years by Annie Ernaux, where again she takes a similar idea and looks at a whole generation of French people, not just women, and the things they believed and the protests they took part in. And they all get married, they all have children, they all get divorced, they all live in this part of Paris, they all shop at this supermarket. So these are the, generational cohorts. So I wanted to write a character who, again, went through certain beats of a certain type of English life, and she fails to be satisfied by it. And her daughter goes through a different set of beats and is perfectly satisfied, and they antagonize each other because one's very miserable and feels like she's been dealt a duff hand, and the other one is satisfied, perhaps even self-satisfied. So I suppose what I wanted to explore in the book was whether that was down to being a product of one's time, down to one's good or bad character or endeavor, or down to just sheer bad luck or good luck.
I read that, if I'm correct, that you were for 4 years. It took you 4 years to write this book. I don't know if I misread. It is a long time to spend dealing with such a painful topic. Has this affected you in any way? Because at the end of the day, this is all the time in your mind, and you're describing the characters in experiencing very dreadful emotions.
That's true. For me, 4 years isn't a terrifically long time to spend writing a book. And by the way, I say I don't really do much else, but it's rather exorbitant time-wise, that's true. I'm slightly doing myself down. I mean, I think I've got a gift, but I also have standards that are quite high compared to what comes out of me without very much. So I do have to spend a long time not in a way that's not too effortful. I have to spend a long time getting the books how I want them to be, especially the last two, which I'm happy with finally. How does it affect me? I don't know. If you ask people close to me, I'm sure they'd think I was a cheerful enough companion. But I suppose it would be. Isn't the line that if you write gloomy stuff, you're a cheerful character, and all the clowns are the ones that are at home crying alone in worlds of evacuated gloom? That's not me. I'm trying to do a sneaky eyebrow raise to the camera there. It's not me, honest.
But I was also asking you this because I have the feeling that when we talk about families and when we challenge this idea, as you do in your book, the idyllic families, my mother is my best friend, all those things that sometimes you hear and that are terrible, many people feel like they feel challenged or even threatened by these ideas. Have you felt that this has happened? I know that this book just was published in Spanish, but it has been for quite some time around in English. So have you felt there was any buzz about this book when you were talking about family in such a non-positive light, if you want?
Well, it was quite interesting. A very, very good friend of mine, Susie Boyd, wrote a book about mothers and daughters and grandmothers as well at the same time as me, and we did a lot of festivals and events together, and they'd always have rather extreme titles saying things like Mothers, the tenderness and the terror, or Mothers, the difficulty and the dread, and all this kind of thing. And we'd have to just venture out there and try and live up to this billing. I'm trying to think. I mean, one encounters readers less than you might imagine. So I don't know of anyone. I mean, I've had people be quite hostile about the character of Bridget, saying that she's cold, callous, judgmental, not smelly. And I often take that a little bit personally, but I'm not sure why, because she's not me, but I feel a little bit defensive about the idea that it should all be sunshine and roses. One, that wouldn't make a book, and two, I think in the book it's not quite that black and white.
Total. Sí, sí.
Absolutely. We will talk about this perception, about the character of Bridget, but for now, I have the feeling, at least in Spain, this is happening. I don't know if you also share this feeling, that sometimes it's as if we had really opened the doors to this, and we see that there are many movies and TV shows that deal with the difficulties of that we find within the families that we didn't used to talk about so much, and all of a sudden this seems to be more in the open right now. There's a sentence that you use in your book that is said by Mary, who says that she's tired of playing families. I think that this is a very concise way of expressing something very clearly. It's this sacrosanct institution of the family is starting to crumble or to have cracks. Would you say that?
I think perhaps in my book I'm trying to show the effect of I think, going from that early scene where the daughter's observing the mother, I think there are things wrong in the particular family or setup in my book that children can get very tuned into. Children can detect lies. Children know when something's a little bit off. They really feel it, I think. And of course, that's not great because no one wants to be scrutinized. And I think the terrible thing is in my book that both mother and daughter become entrenched in their own opposed positions, really. And the last thing the mother wants is to be looked at. The last thing the mother wants, who feels insecure about her life, is for there to be a person there telling her quite how she's got it wrong, or even just demonstrating by her own success that happiness is possible and life doesn't have to be this rotten, because the mother has tried to live according to a certain code. It's normal to hate your job. It's normal to get married and have kids, even if it makes you miserable. It's it's normal for us to keep meeting for my birthday for a cheerful birthday meal, even though it's a awful parody of cheerfulness when they meet each other. So this unwillingness to break through to something that's real, I think, is a large part of what's making them unhappy. But I also, in my book, wanted to show that there's a little bit of an absence of community and of faith even, and that's all helping to make this woman feel isolated and excluded. So later in the book, when she's on her own, she sort of turns to TV programs a lot. An English TV soap called Coronation Street, where everyone on the street has lived there forever and known each other forever and look out for each other. And towards the end, the mother is watching this soap because it's been on for 30 years and she knows these people like friends. But yeah, the institution of the family has failed to really support her in that way.
Well, I would like to read a small fragment where you say, "My mother loved rules," which is exactly what you were saying. My mother loved rules. She used to love rules and codes and expectations, the established expectations. I would like to say that, like the dog, she would like to play go fetch. She's also the consolation of the crowd, of participating, of not feeling alone, and without a clear path. I've chosen this fragment because you can see the style that you have, that is very concise. You have told us that you're very thorough when it comes to writing, and that is very clear in your writing. When I was reading you really leave us with the bones, the essence of the thing. I don't know if you're like purifying or cleaning up until you get to this perfect nakedness.
Possibly, yeah. I don't want any clutter on the page, and I think you can, with words, do a lot with very little. And in this book, there's a lot that's left out, and the exchanges are quite testy, so one's able to one's able to get across a sense of the way the years have gone by with them talking to each other in this way by just having a little glimpse at it every now and then. But as far as my writing style goes, oh yes, definitely. I like to pare it back. Nothing cheers me up more than cutting out a sentence, and I'm always amazed at how little you need, really. You find yourself just using words like polyfiller sometimes, thinking you need to tell people certain things, but it's usually all implied by what's gone before, my experience. And I like an elegant sentence, and I like to chop up the rhythm a little bit so that it doesn't sound like, a greetings card or something like that. Lyrical writing, I'd love to read it. I can't really do it. It's not my thing. Flights of fancy. So, yeah, I think that's where it's going. I don't know. Yeah, well, we'll see where it goes, but that's where it is at the moment.
A mí me encanta, ¿eh? O sea,
I love it. I think it's just perfect. Another reason why I wanted to read this short fragment is because I wanted to show you that the narrator, Bridget, is at all times looking at the mother, talking about her mother, to the point that she is almost blurred in the background because she's always measuring herself against her mother. It's this sort of opposition, comparison that happens all the time throughout the book. I don't know if these are the phantoms that you are talking about, if she is sort of being erased by the phantoms that are her parents. Is that the title? Is it the phantoms in the title that make reference to that?
Yes, I'd say so. Well, phantoms can mean so much. I was very pleased when that title came to me. When I'd barely written the book, I just thought, oh, that sounds nice. So that's number one thing you listen for. I want words to sound nice, my phantoms. So sounds good in Spanish too, I think. And the phantoms are, ghosts, people that haunt you. So that Bridget goes off and lives a rather swanky life in London, but she's aware of her mother all the time. So there's that aspect. I think there's also an aspect of it being something she's conjured up. So she has an image of her mother which is perhaps more frightening or threatening than the mother is in real life. So I wrote some scenes where she's going to meet the mother for a meal, and on the way there she's getting terrifically worked up and angry about the evening she's going to have to spend. And then of course as soon as she sits down opposite her mother, it's just mum. It's a sort of woman in her 60s who's nervous and blameless, really, and it all drains away. But there's definitely this phantom mother who frightens her, which might be a phantom of failure, unhappiness, exclusion. And the other thing was that, to say my phantoms, I thought there was something intimate about that, but also weirdly possessive. So I don't know, it all worked for me when it came to me. And I had the cover in England looks is of a statue in a graveyard. My editor said, "Oh, people will think it's a gothic novel," and I thought, well, that's fine if they think it's a horror. If they buy it, what do I care? I'm going to take it back, are they? I thought it was very elegant. Actually, it was a Bill Brandt photo. I thought it was very, very elegant. But that was a worry. I think that it sounded a bit too. But I love the director Terence Davies, and he made a film of Terence Rattigan play, which was about an anguished love affair called The Deep Blue Sea. A friend of mine knew him, and he was very happy to me making a film called The Deep Blue Sea, because he thought a lot of Americans would go and see it because they think it was about sharks. So my next book's going to be...
Mi próximo...
Sorry.
Bueno, hablando de portadas, ¿qué te parece la...?
Talking about the covers, what do you think about the Spanish cover? Do you like it?
It's striking. I love it. It certainly conveys anguish. Yeah.
Nos falta el tiburón.
We're missing the shark there.
Hablando justo antes de entrar, estaba
Talking about before, we were saying that sometimes you found that some readers found Bridget cruel or not very empathetic, and I said that I found it just the opposite. I think that she is the character of a daughter who is trying to get away from an imposing mother figure, and she's trying to protect her own space. However, it is true that I have read some reviews, even in The Guardian, saying that Bridget's character was somewhat cruel. I don't have that feeling. What is your own perception of this character? And I also wanted to ask you, this type of narration that deal with topics that are so intimate and that affect us all differently from a very personal viewpoint. I think that's interesting as a writer, isn't it?
Absolutely, yeah. It's fascinating, and it is a bit of a sort of Rorschach test, I think, what people take from this novel as regards whether Bridget is cruel or not. I think the idea, I mean, there'll be writers out there who could carry it off brilliantly, no doubt. For me, I'd feel a bit queasy about writing a book about a woman who was just railing against the woman who'd had the nerve to give birth to her. I think that would be one-dimensional and not too interesting, but there's certainly, I hope, the possibility in the book that that's what's happening and that we're looking at a bad actor here. But I try to be quite scrupulous about that and to have, you know, some compassion there. Like, these are two people who are trying. They're not estranged. They haven't decided they don't want each other in their life. So they're both, even albeit in a way that's a little bit dreary and conscientious and grudging, they are trying to meet and maintain a relationship. The trouble is, the mother really is an impossible character. I remember when I was starting the book, I imagine it's similar in there, unless the translator's gone way off piste, that the word nothing occurs 3 or 4 times in the first few lines, and I didn't sort of notice that till I'd written on a little bit, and it's quite similar to what happens in King Lear, although there's not many other similarities. There's a nothing, nothing, nothing that sort of tolls at the beginning of the book, and I wanted that sort of hollowness to echo through the book. I think there is something missing in the mother, and I don't think that makes her a rotten person or a rotten mother, but there is something that both of her daughters, there's something that they've apprehended about their mother that they're not wrong about, and it's difficult to deal with, and they're trying, both of them, in different ways. We were talking earlier about the sort of trend the new thing of books about this relationship and not making it look perfect all the time. I mean, the idea that it's suddenly very radical to impugn women who've had children, it strikes me as kind of rotten, so I don't want to do that. But like anything in life, I'm drawn to just investigating it and telling the truth.
Y hay una cosa que
there's something that you use to tell that truth, which is the first person. Bridget is the narrator. She's talking in the first person, and at the same time, I think you do something that is very interesting, because she doesn't try to have the reader empathize with her at all costs. And I think, I don't know, what's the literary intention behind this? Because there must be one. I would like to hear about that, because it would be very easy for her to try and attract the reader towards her own side, and she never does that. It's sort of enigmatic in the way that she's recounting the things that happen.
I've always written in the first person for however many books now, and in the first 3 or 4 I wasn't doing very much that was interesting with that. There was sort of voice novels, and they had a slightly offhand and adolescent angle, I think. But in the last 2 books I started to get much more interested in what the first person could do in terms of exactly what you're saying, because this is someone who is presenting themselves in a way, but there can be a certain vanity in presenting themselves in an unvarnished way as much as if they were trying to ingratiate themselves. So I'm not sure. I just think people can reveal an awful lot through what they don't want to say or don't refer to. So I was keen to have her quite scrupulous, and I didn't want her to be unreliable, and she's certainly not trying to pull the wool over anybody's eyes, but she's a limited creature, as we all are, and so she's telling it in a way that she thinks is vivid and accurate, and trying to have compassion, but also not hiding when she's at the end of her tether with her mother. So I was just really quite taken with the things that I could do with the first person like that, in self-examination and the scrutiny on others and hiding and that, yeah.
Y que además yo te...
Also, I have to say that I read it twice in a row to have it very clear in my mind. And when I was doing my second reading, I realized that all that work that you're doing is even better understood, because all of a sudden it's as if that beginning of your book, it's sort of full of little fragments, memories, and it all gets together. It makes you understand Bridget very well all of a sudden.
The opening chapter.
Sí.
Well, thank you. It's very weird how books arrive and develop. I never have a plan, and yet, as I keep going with it over the 4 years minimum, I say I'm on year 5 with one at the moment. You see how consistent your concerns are, and little images that you've put in because you thought they were interesting or nice or somehow appealed, they will come back at the end without you realizing why. The opening of the book is talking about Hen's parents, and that they're in Venezuela, where they've gone after the war, do some oil extraction. So it's quite a glamorous world at that time. We've got the grandfather, or Hen's father, who was a Spitfire pilot, which in England is just about the most glamorous thing a person could have been. Post-war, he goes to this place which is sunny, exotic, and there's Americans there wearing Wayfarer sunglasses, and it's all not quite England. So I did want to just put that in as a sort of glamorous, golden, shining beginning, in which Hen is born. She's beautiful, she's clever, everyone's admiring her. What a sweet little girl. And then as soon as she gets back to England, it all just gradually begins to go wrong in small and large ways, until she finds herself decades later thinking, hold on, I thought I was special.
Bueno, la figura de la madre creo que...
The figure of the mother, I believe, is very important in this book. Also, in The Guardian, I read an article, because I think in First Love, there's also, I haven't read the book, clearly, obviously, but I know that there was a character of a mother that is also very important in the book. And in The Guardian, they say that the mothers of Riley's books are always showing their teeth at their daughters as dogs scared in front of chimpanzees. Is a mother a figure that is an inexhaustible source of inspiration for writing?
I'm thinking of that painting of the origins of the world. You know that painting? I could have that on the cover of any of my books. Yeah, of course it's inexhaustible. They're very mysterious. Mine was. And the new book's got a mother in it. They're everywhere. It's almost like everyone's... Anyway, where were we? Oh, the animal thing. Yeah, exactly. She's baring her teeth in fear. I did want to get to that. I mean, I'm very keen on writing about English society and where things have gone over the last few years, and silly things like the soap operas or the catchphrases or the high street cafe chains that they go in. But I do, at the same time, want to get in something that's a bit more troubling underneath that, with that word nothing tolling through the book, and also things like that, like where the mother suddenly looks like a frightened animal, like primal fear would be the phrase, and then to a child it's a frightening image. So it's one of those things, again, when you're editing a book, when you feel like you've finished it, you do notice when you've used one word more than you should, or there's something that keeps happening. And of course there are occasions where you think, okay, I've got to cut some of them, and there are other occasions, like with that image of the mother sort of going, what's the word I'm looking for, gurning, or sort of grinning in an unsettling way. I thought, no, I'm going to keep all of them, even though it's happening a lot, because I think there's something quite fearful and frightening about that.
Y me ha parecido entre...
I thought I understood, and maybe this be very personal and partial, but I understood that as daughters we're always holding grudges more against our mothers than our fathers. It looks like Bridget's father is also a terrible character, but at the same time he doesn't look to have this much weight, and there are some sentences of his that are interesting. I never had any interest in or need in asking my father about his life or his logic. Now I find it difficult to remember my dad. I don't know what thread I needed to pull. My father's company was something that you would like to escape from. I don't know if there is a sort of injustice in the way that we look at our mothers. We demand too much from our mothers, and when it comes to the fathers, as in the case of Bridget's father, he was an absent dad, and all these little sketches that appear in the book, he seems to be sort of this non-existing person. Maybe are we a bit unfair when it comes to thinking about our mothers?
Quite possibly, and I did try and hint at that right at the end of the book. So in this case, the father's like a sort of bandit passing through. He sort of has the kids every other weekend, I think, after the divorce, and he's boorish, he's overbearing, he takes them to a Chekhov play, that's good, but then he makes a spectacle of himself and tries to insert himself into the action almost. You half expect him to leap on stage and start telling everybody what Chekhov was all about, that he's just read in the program, not that he knows. So I have him there, and then, as you say, the daughter is not in the least bit fascinated with his character, partly because it's obvious he's just a show-off and doesn't see his kids as human, they're accessories, and it's almost like she makes a decision, I'm not going to be interested in him, boring, you know? Which is, I think, the right decision. Plus there's that lack of identification there. With the mother, of course, they have some similar struggles. They're both women. So there's more of a connection there. So, of course, she's taking it out more on the mother, because the mother is the one who's still around. But right at the end, I do put in a scene, and it's blink and you'll miss it, where the mother mentions something about her marriage to the father, and it looks like she's finally inviting the daughter in to understand her. And I'm trying to remember the line now. She said, it was worse than I've told anyone, the things he made me do. And this is an opening for the daughter to go, what happened? She doesn't. She closes down the conversation because it's too late. She doesn't trust her mother. It's too late. But the hint I wanted to put in there was that it might not be the way the mother's ended up. It might not be because she's fundamentally broken or useless. It might be that a man ruined her life, through his actions. He did something, or he behaved over a period of time in such a soul-destroying, rotten way that it's, fried the mother's head in a way. So I did just want to put that in, because I think it is possible to ruin a person's life. You like to think it's not, but it's not pursued, but I put that in as a possibility, that this idiot, I want to say a stronger word, comes in, behaves the way he does, F's off, and leaves all this anguish in his wake.
Bueno, yo creo que algo que destaca.
Something that is a highlight in the book are the dialogues. I think that they are wonderful. I love the way they've been written. and I think there's a lot of sense of humor there, black humor, and dialogues are also remarkable in this sense. And one of those fragments is my favorite. Mother and daughter are talking at some point, and they're talking about one of the best friends of the mother's, grief, and the mother says, well, if they see me everywhere with him, nobody will come close to me when I'm with him. And the daughter says, couldn't you avoid him for a while? And the mother says, what do you mean by avoiding him? Well, you just said that you're scared that you're worried that he scares people off. Well, I was just answering to what you were saying. Wouldn't you like to see less of him and do something on your own? And the mother says, well, I do things on my own 99% of the time. And she sighed, and I understood why. She couldn't trust me. Either I believed her or I didn't. I'm not allowed to say anything. I'm just saying that he's very domineering, that we need to do everything the way he wants us to do them. Yes, I understand. It's a pity that it is that way. What? I don't know. Well, okay, he hates you. Really? Seriously? I told her about your job and Michelle. And she said, I hate your daughters. And she said, wonderful. Sorry about the translation. There are many dialogues like this, and they're very agile, they're very quick, and there are always these hints underlying the conversation. I would like to ask you how you do this, because one of the most difficult things here is to write dialogues that are realistic, that are interesting to read. Do you go in the public transport and listen to people's conversations and write down your notes? How do you build these dialogues?
I think maybe I've just had I was going to say beady eyes, but I've had my ears tuned into this kind of thing for a long time, because I was one of those children who was looking out for when everyone was lying and dissembling. I'm not sure. I think it really is just listening, and then you edit it and you can get that sense of a conversation. I'm not sure how stylized it even is to represent that truth, but a conversation like that, or a lot of their conversations, if you imagine a sort of flow chart, and every single thing that she tries to say to her mother to get a response that would show that they're making progress or deciding they can do something about her situation, it's just met with a refusal, or she denies what she's just said, and the whole thing becomes sort of abyssal and at the same time weirdly bureaucratic. And it's really sad. I mean, that's the guy. Griff is the mother's best friend. She has a gay best friend, and Griff is the nicest guy in the book, and he really supports her when she's ill, and he always boosts her, and he's always there. But in Hen's mind, this is a sort of awful parody of the couple that she really wants to be in. So she can't see what's in front of her face, really, in the same way that she can't see that she's got two daughters who are doing their best. She's got this friend who's a really good guy and wants to hang out with her all the time, and she just spends all her time slagging him off because, he's not a sort of hunky boyfriend that she wants. And it is sad that she hasn't got the other, but it's a very hard needle to thread as a writer, to try and write a frustrating dialogue in a way that doesn't make the reader feel that it's an endurance test. So that's not the right kind of writer I want to be, really. I want people to enjoy it. So quite a big chunk of the book is dialogue between those two, and I could have written hundreds of pages of that. It really does just come to me, unfortunately. It was drilled into me. But I was quite judicious and just cut it down to represent certain angles of attack, really. As I say, like this flow chart. I'll try this with my mother. Will that do anything? I'll suggest this. No, she doesn't want that. So does she just want to complain? Okay, so I'll say, I hear you. That doesn't work either. So, as I say, she's impossible. So it's this very frustrated series of, attacks.
Y bueno, digamos que el libro...
Well, your book, as we were saying before, I think, is built from the domestic things, from the household, without moving away too much from the little things, these little tensions that are always underlying every relation. But as you said in the beginning, you are dealing with very big topics. When we talk about this generation of mothers that felt this pressure to become mothers, and I don't know, I am remembering once where the mother says, it's what you did. This is what you needed to do. I don't know if you have seen the movie about Chantal Ackerman, where the mother is trying to explain to her son her life, that the life of a mother where she couldn't have, when she didn't have a choice. And also I remember the book Regretful Mothers, where we also hear about this generation of mothers who didn't have this choice. They were just meant to have children, and with resource economy that I really envy when you write this book. I think that you present all these topics. This tamed daughter, which is one of the scenes in the book that really caught my attention, where she tries to, where she simulates a conversation that she's so used to, that she knows that is what she has to do. All these topics that are really the backbone of the book, that are in the background but are always there, present.
Yeah, that's sort of. I have Hen moved to London in the swinging 60s, so she ends up, on Carnaby Street in a miniskirt, while this fabulous sexual revolution is going on, which she's all for, and she feels in the swim, and she's part of something, and it's all happening. And then, guess what? She's been sold a pup, and give it 10 years, she's married to a chauvinistic man, and what's next? Oh yeah, have kids. So just like lots of other generations, except of course what she has that previous ones didn't is the option of divorce. So she does that. And I remember from my own school days, half the kids in my class, they'd had similar situations of the mothers more or less running away while the dad was at work, putting the two kids in a taxi or whatever. So I think that was quite a generational experience. And the mother in my book, she clings to these because she feels part of something, but at the same time there's a little bit of horror to it. So I remember my mother, by the way, was very different to the mother in the book, but I do remember her saying to me that she hadn't particularly wanted children, but that was just what you did. I'm glad she did. I'm enjoying my life. But I also remember her saying about childbirth particularly, she said, I wouldn't put my worst enemy through that. I wouldn't want a daughter of mine to have to go through that kind of thing, because she found it so wrenching to her personhood, I suppose. And I was interested, I don't have any scenes in the book of Bridget's very young life, because she can't remember it, but I think knowing Hen as we do, we can't imagine that when this baby emerged and was put on Hen's chest, and they were supposed to, over the next days, bond, look into each other's eyes, pull a face, the other baby pulls a face back. You just can't imagine Hen doing that. It's very hard to think back, to imagine back to the woman that she is, being able to do that. And I think that might, I don't know, is that the source of their alienation? It's deeply sad that didn't happen, but I think there's a hint that probably wouldn't have taken. I don't know.
Another topic that you touch on in your book, and that I find very interesting in the second half of your book in particular, if you think that we are maybe going to give you a spoiler, please cover your ears. But there's a moment where Bridget has to move, and because her mother falls ill, and she has to spend some time with her. And I believe that you deal very well with that problem. What happens when I have to take care of an elderly person with whom my relationship is not so good? Because I think that really breaks all hell loose. Sometimes at the same time you feel guilty and you feel that you're responsible and you need to do that, and there's a part of you who is not ready to do that. As a reader, I want to thank you because you have not romanticized this. I think that you describe this with a full cruelty that is very much connected with the reality.
I think if there hasn't been abuse, I think common decency says you do have to do that. But as the book shows, it's very tricky when the relationship is difficult, and suddenly, I mean, the childish part of Bridget, I think, is mildly outraged. Oh, this person didn't take care of me, and now I have to take care of them. Well, yeah, do it, get over it. So she does, and she's got a sister who lives near her and who's doing it as well. But I think, I mean, again, I don't know. This is something that happens towards the end of the book. The mother gets very ill. She has a brain tumor. So this is where the sort of drama and propulsion of the book sort of demands certain things happen, because it just going on as it was would make one kind of book, but I wanted it to have a bit more to it than that. So this mother gets a brain cancer. It's called a glioblastoma, and so essentially her ability to communicate is really gone. And I thought that would be an interesting thing to do, because all these decades Bridget has been thinking, I can't talk to my mum, I can't get through to my mum, we just can't communicate with each other. So it felt like, to me, an interesting dramatic move to make that actually physically, literally true. She can't talk to her mother now. That possibility has gone. What there is now is a sort of remnant phantom, switching in and out of focus person there for a few months, during which time, you know, this is it. Be conscientious, be kind, but these emotions are still going to be in turmoil, because suddenly even the possibility has been taken away, which happens. So that was, to me, that's again, that's accurate. That's life. There's terrible, undeserved suffering. So I wanted to bring that in, and the sorrow and the compassion, and also the, frankly, anger. Oh great, now she's really gone. All that, I thought that would work. And then at the end of the book, I hope it's left open whether this will make Bridget change in the future, whether she will think of her mother often with guilt, with fondness, or never again. I think anything's possible. I hope it's open.
A mí me ha traído a la cabeza.
This brought to my mind precisely because of the truth that we see there. It has brought to my mind two books, The Sweetest Death from Simone de Beauvoir and A Woman from Anya Agnon. Both books, at Simone de Beauvoir talks about her mother once she passed, and she sort of tries to remake the portrait of this woman that she never got to see, and Agnon, who talks about her mother dealing with Alzheimer and what she goes through. But they're talking about the non-fiction perspective, so they're allowing her themselves this cruelty, this crudity, if you want, because sometimes when we're dealing with fiction, when this is not real, we tend to portray it in a more sweet way, if you want.
Well, another book in that line would be Philip Roth's book Patrimony, about when his father was very ill, and there's a famous scene in that book where something undignified happens to the father's body, and he says to Philip, please don't write about this, and you're reading about it as he says that. I love the Annie Ernaux book. I haven't read the other one yet. I will. It's true, though, the idea of remaking the relationship with them once they're gone. I love that Auden poem about Louis MacNeice, where he says the dead we miss are easier to talk to because they're not in front of you pulling faces anymore, and you can, it's a liberty in a way, but that's, a liberty in both ways, as in taking liberties, but as in there's a bit of freedom there, and you can perhaps honor a person in that way.
Bueno, podéis...
Now we're opening the Q&A. If you have any questions, I'm going to ask a final question, and I will give you time to think up your own questions, if you have any. And stepping out of your book, I have read in an interview, I think, about precisely this book in a UK medium. You said, "This book is saying what I want to say, but better. With First Love, I realized that I had things clearer in my mind, and I felt as if I was reaching where I wanted to be. It's sort of an advancement, but it's also a clarification. I don't know if my Phantoms follow up on this thread, on this line of thought."
I hope so. I mean, you can only hope you get. I think there are sort of variety writers who nip about into all different genres and do them all fabulously or not, or hit and miss. And then there's writers, benighted writers like me, who have to keep worrying at the same thing, maybe with a tiny bit of progression or getting somewhere with it. And I think with this book, yes, definitely, I felt like I'd clarified certain things for myself. For now, it's all provisional. And with First Love, which was my bad marriage book, not my bad marriage book, my book about a bad marriage, to clarify, I think both of them sort of got things down that I'd been sort of like trying to get at in the previous books that hadn't quite come together in the same way. So we'll see what the next installment brings.
Bueno, lo que esperemos es que se...
What we hope is that we get the translation of First Love. We're going to ask this from the publishers present here today. Does anybody have a question here in the audience?
Pues te voy a hacer yo otra más.
So I'm going to be asking another question. I don't know if it's going to be the last one. There's something that I find very intriguing about authors. When you were writing My Phantoms, could you tell us what books or movies or what music were you reading, listening to? Is there anything in particular that you have used, or if you move away completely from what you're writing and you want to be immersed in things that have nothing to do with what you're writing? Or can you tell us if you have read something that has had any influence in the writing of My Phantoms?
Oh God, that's the type of question you need to ask me in advance, because my mind goes completely blank. Well, here's an unexpected thing, perhaps. I got very into Dickens when I was writing this book, and I think Great Expectations, the best, well, the joint best, in my opinion. So without noticing it at the time, I did rip that off a little bit at the beginning of this, where Helen can't pronounce her own name, so she says hen when she's a baby. And of course that's Great Expectations, when Philip Pirrip can't say his name and says Pip, because that's all his infant tongue can get around. So that's really, what shall I say, an homage, a rip-off of Dickens right there, but in its own way. And she has Great Expectations. And our mutual friend as well, for the character Mr. Podsnap, who is so incorrigible and so set in his ways, because I like to think that characters don't have to be rounded. They often just need one purpose and one way of being, and that works quite well in fiction, so perhaps that fed into it as well. Films, I love the films of Arnaud Desplechin, and I think that mixture, especially in this one where we've got Bridget's moved to London and living with a psychoanalyst and a little bit austere. I think there's a little bit of the sort of Desplechin Parisian bourgeoisie there, and the psychoanalyst angle and the sort of antic behaviour in those films. That's all I've got.
Bueno, y hablas en el libro, aparece...
In your book, you talk about Elena Ferrante. I don't know if you mention her, Elena Ferrante. Has she been among the books that you have read, or is it just a mention that looked good in the book?
There was, I can't remember what year it was now, but there was a year when all the women in London, well, a few dozen of them were all reading Elena Ferrante. It felt like we were all reading her. That was, and I think in the book, what happens in the book is the daughter tries to give these as a present to her mother, thinking, we'll have something to talk about. And also thinking, genuinely, it's not a stupid present. She thinks the mother might enjoy those books because they're about the progress of a woman's life, and they're not highbrow, they're quite raucous, they're full of incident, they're loud, dramatic, OTT in places. So I think it's this gesture, again, one of these failed connection gestures. I love Elena Ferrante. I love the Neapolitan books more than the shorter ones, which are a bit too much like having a bucket of bleach poured on your head. So I stuck them in the book. Of course, the mother just gets a bit confused and then tragically just keeps pressing on with them. And the daughter's saying, don't worry, it doesn't matter, you don't have to read them all. But it's a terrible gift to give someone 4 enormous books. It's just a bit like have this obligation. It's awful, it's stupid, but she's trying.
Pero tú eres, fíjate.
But you are a writer who writes very short books. I think this is also part of your identity as an author, and I really value this, because I think that if you can tell something in 200 pages, that's much better than using 600 pages. So your books are very concise. It's what we were talking about earlier. You're always trying to be concise, to be brief.
Yeah, well, life is short. I love long books. I love long books, but I don't know if I mean, apart from those Ferrante books, and recently I've got into these Robert Caro LBJ books, totally different. I don't know. It's not a choice. This is I may have some huge excess of creativity and write my own 4-book series. But I don't know. This seems to work for me. It's weird, isn't it? So some people are Emma Melville, and some people are Emily Dickinson, and I'm me, and this is this, and yeah. I can't bear the idea of eking things out or writing things that are just perfunctory. I like nothing more than watching crime TV series, like detective shows, by the way. Not like crime, but detective shows. But anytime I've tried to read a detective novel, it's only interesting for the first few chapters, and then you think, Christ, now I've got to watch them work it all out. It's just, in terms of reading and sentences, that doesn't work for me. But, I can't bear the idea of overdoing it.
No sé si alguien quiere preguntar.
Any questions from the audience? Any questions? We have one here.
A ver, yo no he leído el libro.
I have to say that I have not read the book, and this is a personal question. If you don't want to answer, I would understand it totally. I would like to ask you if you have children yourself.
No.
No los tienes, ¿no?
Mm-mm.
You don't. Thank you. That was it. Thanks.
Pues no sé si nadie tiene nada.
If nobody else has another question, or would you like to share anything else with us, Gwendoline, before we call this a day?
But I think that's an interesting point, because the characters in the book don't have children either, so they're not going to suffer the same coming back at them at any point, which I think is an interesting sidestepping of consequences.
Pues nada, yo...
Well, I strongly recommend reading this book. It is a wonderful reading. You will enjoy it on a first reading, on a second reading, and also, as Gwendoline says, life is short, and this book is also concise, so that's an added value. Thank you very much. Thank you, Gwendoline.